Good evening and welcome, everybody. It's so fun to see a full room and so much energy here. We are excited to have you here. My name is Heidi Fisher, and it is my sincere honor to serve as the president for St. Paul Rotary, and more importantly, to welcome you all here today. Um, Welcome to those of you joining us here at Base Camp, and we also have a nice group joining us on Zoom as well. And so, a huge welcome to those of us joining us on Zoom. We are so excited to host the 18th, and I thought about this, Ellen, the 18th annual Community Forum. Amazing. So as we look at that, this forum is called "Minding the Gap: Constructive Conversations in a Polarized World." Very excited to have Bill Doherty here and to hear what Bill has to say, and to learn from Bill and learn from each other as well. A quick note: today will be recorded and then be available via archive afterwards. So just an FYI for those of you here joining us and as well as those on Zoom. All right, we are pushing the button forward and it doesn't seem to be going. Technical errors. I'm going to look to my friend Ross over here. So thank you. We are so fortunate to have Rotarians and friends joining us today from near and far. I heard Owatonna, I think Eau Claire. We are just, it's wonderful to come together as Rotarians and also friends. I want to say that, a forum like this doesn't happen without a whole bunch of people. So I'm going to do some quick welcomes. Thank you to our club hosts, which you can see up here: St. Paul Rotary, Minnesota City of Lakes, and also Roseville Rotary. I also want to thank our co-chairs, Ellen, who's sitting right up here, as well as Dave, and the planning team. And I can't list off everybody's names. It is a community that came together to make this happen, and they are in your program. So look through there. Our greeters: Michael John Peace from St. Paul Rotary, Maggie Mao. Maggie, I know, is running around. She's also going to be a runner, and there she is. Thank you for being our greeter. And we just went backwards, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. And also Greg Ulm as our greeter. So thank you. Thank you to Base Camp. Oh, I love it. And I want to call out 3 special guests today. And when I call your name, if you could stand, I would really appreciate it. We have tonight with us District Governor from 5960, Patricia McLeese. Patricia, thank you. You can, Patricia, if you don't mind, stay standing. That would be fantastic. We also have past District Governor from 5960, Ed Merrick. And then we have District Governor Designee Michael John Pease. And Michael John, thank you. All right. Thank you. Ed Bovey as well. Ed, thank you so much. I knew if I started doing thank yous, I would forget somebody. So if I do, please stand up and be recognized. Ed, thank you for being here. Thank you. All right. Can we fast forward it once more? Thank you. We're going to start out by doing the 4-way test before I turn it over to Ellen, who's going to do the wonderful introduction of Bill. And the 4-way test, our Rotarians know this. We always start this out for our meetings, but it is really, it's a principle that we all live by and we use to judge, make ethical decisions as Rotarians. And it's some part of our guiding principles. So if you would all join me in the 4-way test. And stand, that'd be wonderful. Thanks. All right. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be goodwill and better friendship? And Todd Nicholson. You need to say it louder, Todd, so we all hear it. Is it fun? We as Rotarians want to have fun. So, with that, I am going to thank you all again from my bottom of my heart for being here, for making this beautiful evening happen as we all gather and learn. I'm going to turn it over to our co chairs.
Thank you, Heidi. Lovely. Welcome. Um, David and I are so grateful this evening to welcome Bill Doherty back to the forum. 18 years ago, David and I belonged to the St. Paul Sunrise Rotary. And at that time, the insidious problem of polarization um, was already making it hard for members to um, feel comfortable having candid conversations with one another. This tension inspired our club then to have its very first forum, navigating ideological minefields while working for the common good. Our presenters then were Skip Humphrey and Chuck Slocum, then the respective leaders of the Minnesota DFL and Republican parties, who demonstrated for us how they could find common ground on the most volatile and diverse topics facing us then and still facing us today, such as abortion and gun violence, and how they could remain friends. 12 years later, a Rotary friend, Bert Riskadal, recommended to our annual forum planning meeting that we meet Bill Doherty. Bill had recently co-founded a national organization called Better Angels, now called Braver Angels. We were delighted when Bill generously agreed to present a workshop for our 13th annual forum in 2018 to help us find common ground for the common good. Our attendees at that forum were so enthusiastic about Bill's strategies for navigating polarization that they clamored for workshops to come to their own clubs, which led to Rotary District 5960's ethics team to sponsor numerous Braver Angels workshops in Rotary clubs over the past several years. More recently, District 5960 also endorsed Reduce the Rancor, the Minnesota initiative, which Bill also helped to found. We come to the forum, all of us tonight, eager to learn how we can mind the gap and develop constructive conversations in our polarized world. Please join David and me and all three of our co-sponsoring clubs in warmly welcoming Dr. Bill Doherty back to the forum.
All right. So thank you for that. It was really great to get that history. My goodness, that's what you started out with. So in other words, we haven't solved the problem. So I have to say that I was worried unnecessarily that you would be all eating at tables with half of you turning your back to me. But so it's great you're looking this way. And I also forgot how fast Rotarians eat. So those are worries I didn't have. And then my next worry was the weather. Okay, but at least it's not snow. And then I thought, okay, they're going to be in a bad mood when they get here. And then I saw the cupcakes. So we thanked a bunch of people, but David, where are you, David? The cupcake. David, cupcakes. There's no better preparation for a speaker than for people to have cupcakes. The only thing that's even better is an award celebration when half of the room gets an award. So cupcakes and awards, but I'll take this. So Ellen set it up really well. What we're here to talk about polarization, and I want to begin by we're going to be interactive here tonight. I want to begin by asking a few of you to with the microphone, or my where's Maggie? Okay, so just to briefly introduce yourself and say why you came on this rainy night. For the cupcakes, I know, but in addition to that, why you came for this conversation we're going to have. So, who would like to? Usually, in a room this size, there's 15% of you who are extroverts like me who think other people are dying to hear why you came. It's part of what makes the world go round. So would somebody just raise your hand and be willing to introduce yourself? Okay. If you could stand, that'd be great.
I am most interested because I have two brothers,
What's your name?
Joel Tyson from
Yeah.
St. Paul Rotary,
Yeah.
who I'm very close to, but we cannot talk anything
Yeah.
about politics.
Yeah.
Friends, the same thing.
Yeah.
And no matter if you say to them, let's not talk politics and just get together, before you know it, one of them will start digging away. And it's just a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that. Yes. Somebody else, would you like to introduce? Right here, Meg. Yeah.
My name is Aaron Jardy. I'm a member of the St. Paul Rotary Club, and I am here because a former club that I was a member of in Lebanon, New Hampshire, there were two best friends that were polar opposites in their political opinions, and they had so much fun ribbing each other. And it was healthy and constructive and absolutely hilarious, and clearly a fundamental part of their friendship. And I think they set a great example for so many others. And I'm hoping to hear more about what you have to say for that, and would love to be one of those examples.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm going to hand it to this gentleman. You're pretty good. He said, hand me your mic.
Excellent.
He's big too.
Well, I'm Carl Johnson. I'm running for county commissioner in Rochester, Minnesota, Olmsted County. I'm out campaigning, knocking on doors. So that opens up that proverbial conversation about what party do you represent? And then you get all the ideas that come along with it. So I'm here to learn some tactics.
No, it sounds tactics, like military tactics there. So, okay, thank you. Yes, because you're going to be experiencing a lot. So somebody else over here. Yeah. We picked the fastest young person in the room. I specified we did not want orthopedic injuries of the person running around.
I'm Jan Vanderwall from Roseville Rotary. By the way, we are not with, it was Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then Roseville was kind of like not in the same one. So I'm saying that we are the club, another one of the sponsor clubs.
Proudly from
Proudly,
Roseville.
very proudly. Small, but powerful. I'm actually here because I'm not optimistic. What I've seen since the Braver Angels that we saw several years ago in our club is that positions have hardened. And so I'm hoping that you can give me something, but I'm not optimistic yet. And I'd like to be optimistic. I normally am.
Yeah,
Thank
I hear you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for those who started us off. So what I'm going to do is to set up the problem of polarization, and then we're going to have some discussion about sources of the polarization. And then I'm going to turn to what we can do as individuals. And then I'll talk about some of the things that we can do and are doing as communities. So polarization, as the historians and the political scientists are talking about it, is not mainly about issues. It's not mainly about left-wing issues and right-wing issues. It's mainly nowadays about how we feel about each other. And that's called affective polarization or social polarization. So it's not that we disagree. If you actually look at a lot of the surveys on many controversial issues, many Americans are either center left or center right. If you take abortion, if you take guns, you take a lot of things. But when we're dividing up about who we vote for and what party we're part of, what's happening increasingly is that we pull apart from each other. And the historians are saying we have not been this divided since the 1850s. Okay, that's pretty ominous. And I'm old enough, and a few of you are, to remember the 60s, the 1960s, and this is worse. We still had Thanksgiving dinner. Right now, 10% of Americans have cut off a family member over politics, cut them off, okay? And whereas we hung in there and we argued with each other, but we didn't cut each other off. So this affective or social polarization is happening. And I want to give you 3 categories for it that social scientists talk about. The first is othering, which is the idea that these 70+ million people who vote differently than I did in the last election, who are they? They're strangers. I don't get them. So I ask you to think about whether you ever feel that way. How in the world could a reasonable person support this cause, that politician, whatever, okay? So if you guys could be as quiet as possible, that would be great. Okay, yeah. I like to have all the attention, and they're paying attention to each other, so it's bad. So othering is the first thing. Don't get those people. They're strangers. They're alien. And we're not talking about just a politician. We're talking about like your brother-in-law, okay? Because extended family, and not your brother-in-law, but I understand. Extended families, by the way, one of the last bastions of political diversity because you don't choose your relatives. And then they marry strange people too. It's just, and of course, those people look at us the same way. So it all goes around. So the first is othering. And the second is disdain. And that is, I don't understand them or get them. I don't like them or trust them. So dislike and disdain. And the way this has happened is we have not so much fallen in love with our own political parties more. We've fallen in hate of the other side. So the political scientists have been studying this for 40 years, something called a political thermometer on a scale from 0 degrees to 100 degrees. How do you feel about your own party? And then how do you feel about the other party? There used to be, people felt about 72 degrees, perfect weather, towards their own party, and about 55 towards the other party. Well, the other party, their own party has stayed there, and the other one has gone way, way down. Okay, they feel cold towards the other party. And not just the party, but to people in it. So othering, disdain, and then the third one is that these people are morally compromised. They're bad people. I want the best for the country, and the people who agree with me want the best for our country or for Rochester or that county. And the other side, they don't want the best. They are ill-motivated. They are unethical. Can you see when you get that combination going? I don't get them, I don't trust them or like them, and they're morally compromised. That is, we're in dangerous territory when that occurs, because can be lots of justification for how we treat people when we have those. Accompanying this has been a major decline in trust in our social institutions. It used to be that some of our social institutions could buffer how we were feeling about each other. So social institutions have been a major decline, and almost all of them, professions, social institutions, since the 1970s. So let's start out with, we all agree, government, right? Tanking. If you go back to the 1960s, 78% of Americans thought government could be mostly trusted to do the right thing. It's about 23% now. So what other social institutions have seen a drastic decline in trust and trustworthiness? Okay, so I wasn't expecting all the talking at once. This is a Rotary group. I'm used to having to beg it out of people. So one person, give me one. Pardon me? Medicine. Yes, a big decline. It had started before COVID, but a drastic hit with medicine and public health. Well, one of the most kind of emotionally searing presentations I've done in recent years was with school nurses who are used to being trusted. And COVID just did that in for many, many families, that when they would call home, the parents weren't necessarily trusted. So healthcare. So give me another one. Pardon me? Churches. So religion, big drop in attendance, but also in trust. Okay, another one. Education. Again, I teach at the University of Minnesota. Universities used to be kind of revered as places of higher learning and research and so on. Now, really not so much. And even our local schools. A few years ago, when Braver Angels was just getting going, I talked to some people from School Board Association, and they said, well, good for you. We're glad you're doing this work. We don't have the problem. Okay, so education. Yes, sir.
Law enforcement in general and the legal system.
Yes, law enforcement, big declines in trust, and the legal system in general, including the courts. Okay, so look how the Supreme Court used to be revered. It'll get sorted out there. Okay, and now we talk about it as a red judge or a blue judge, right? And so, how about another one?
House of Representatives and the Senate's not quite as bad.
Yeah, you get at the bottom barrel of trust for the U.S. Congress, the bottom barrel. And the thing is, they know it, and they're just sort of locked into that.
Mainstream media.
Mainstream, yeah, the media. Some of us, again, are old enough to remember when there were 3 TV channels and commercial ones, and then a PBS. And when Walter Cronkite, I won't ask for a show of hands who's old enough to remember Walter Cronkite, but you all have gray hair. So anyway, Walter Cronkite, for those who are younger, he used to end his show by saying, and that's the way it is, April 16th, and you could argue maybe there was too much homogeneity of news then. So I'm not saying that, I don't want to go back to an era that was somehow thought to be perfect. But now we have the proliferation and much less trust in media. Science. Again, there was a way in which we revered science. And now it's not considered trustworthy. I don't think people are so much worrying about the nuclear physics, but anything that touches human life, we're not trusting science. Yes. Pardon me?
What have we gained more trust in?
Oh, it'd be hard to say that we've gained more trust in anything. There's some that haven't had as big a hit. Firefighters and first responders. Military is still pretty up there, but you could count on one hand the number of professions that I used to say nursing, but they've taken a hit with COVID. Nursing used to be way up there. Nursing and firefighters. So practically every other, and we could go on. So what happens is then when we are increasingly divided politically, and we don't have these social institutions that we trust, so we can't have shared facts or shared information to make decisions on. Okay, so this is one of the big things that people bring up, because when Braver Angels, as I say later, we bring together people who differ politically and see if they can find common ground. And one of the challenges we get is, well, how can you have a conversation if you can't agree on facts? Now, by the way, the person who says that believes they are in possession of the facts. And they're saying, how do I deal with these people who don't? So here's my response, that policy relevant facts, hardly any of us have direct access to. Unless you are a climate scientist, you do not have direct access to that science. Unless you study elections, you don't have direct access to whether there's a lot of voter fraud or not. Policy, so for facts like I'm standing here in front of you, I don't need anybody else. I have direct access to that. But for facts about how we do public policy, it depends on who we trust. what sources of information we trust. And we do not trust the same sources of information. And those sources are in battling with each other. So we lack a common basis of fact. Now, I'm going to argue, particularly later, we don't have to share the same facts to begin the conversation, because we can begin the conversation by listening to each other and asking us where we got our facts, and to do that in a respectful way. In other words, what are your sources? So the workshops I've been giving to medical professionals in an era of low trust is the doctor can no longer say, I went to medical school and you didn't. When the patient disagrees about vaccines or something, just say, I hear you on that. Tell me how you got your information, and I'll tell you how I got my information. And to do it with respect. As opposed to the old days, they used to say, what medical school did you go to? Okay, that day is over. But we have a new world in which we can't just assume that my source is going to be your source unless we can respectfully deal with each other. So we're in quite a pickle, and I want to ask you to now think with me, and we're going to do a little group conversation about this, of what are some of the sources of the rise in this polarization. What are some of the sources of the rise? It's been rising for at least 35 years through multiple administrations. So when you think about your answer to the question, don't blame the other party or the current or past president. That would be taking the low road here, because it's for multiple administrations. It's happening in Great Britain. Think about Brexit. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in much of the developed world, where people are more polarized and have lower trust. So we're going to do an exercise here. So the question is, what are some of the sources of the rise in political polarization, affective polarization in the last 35 years? The answers, isn't just one answer, of course, but the answers have to be either something new or something that changed. So actually, we have a couple of guys who are from 5th grade where I got it. So we're actually going to do a little group exercise on it. I was that 5th grader, by the way. So it has to be something that's new or changed. In other words, don't say human nature, because I don't think that started to change 35 years ago. What's different, which has changed, going up or down, or been introduced in the last 35 years that has led to this? So here is the exercise we're going to do. I'm going to give us all 60 seconds to ponder that question. And then I'm going to have you pair up with somebody at your mini table here for 3 minutes to talk about it. She just lined hers up there. Ma'am, that's why you were at the table. You had no choice but to go with him. Anyway, so again, the question is, what are some of the sources of the rise in polarization over the last 35 years? And we're going to begin with a moment of silent reflection. And at the end of that time, I'm going to signal you to turn to the person at your table. Don't leave some poor third person alone or something, at the end. And then you just have 3 minutes to just get some things out. But we're going to begin with a silent reflection. What are some of the sources of the rise of political polarization? So if we could have silence right now, that would be great. Okay, ding, 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 ding. Shh. Thank you. Shh. Okay. Shh. Okay, back up here. Thank you. Okay, thank you. If you're like me, shh. Never start talking if you're the speaker. Well, because if I start talking and you're still talking, you'll talk louder. You won't be able to hear me. Oops, we got some. Can we not have people entertaining back there? No, I want the attention. That's right. So I noticed it when you, hey, there's my old friend. How are you? Okay. Oh, by the way, there is coffee and water in the back, I was told. So feel free to get up and move around and get that, and more cupcakes back there. Okay, so who would like to go first with one source of the rise of political polarization? Just call it out. Yeah, just you just got nominated, ma'am. Okay, so increasing social change with communities that have been less visible, claiming their place. We go back to the 60s with civil rights and so on. This creates tension in societies. This creates tensions, yeah. Although what I would point out is that the 60s were a high watermark of that. And there've been other movements since the 80s, but this big rise has been since the 80s. So I get you that there's a substrate there, but we managed that better then than we're doing now. But I hear you on that. Yes. Yeah, so 24-hour news, and I'll repeat for people who are not hearing it and for those on Zoom. The well, say it a little bit more. Why is the 24 news cycle contributing?
Of the fact that no matter what station you watch, they always have to find something sensational to keep people's attention and to get the advertisers. I don't care if it's CNN or Fox or whatever.
Yeah.
I just told Ken I'm interviewing him on a high-power show, and he's the most noted financial person in the world. And all of a sudden I go, oh, excuse me, late breaking news. Tom Smith just broke his tooth and he might not be a juror.
Yes. So the 24-hour news cycle with multiples, you can hand the mic back there, has created this competition for eyeballs and ears. And what we know from human psychology is that negatives attract people more than positives. And then we can get that stimulus. I don't know about you, somehow part of my brain still gets hooked when I hear breaking news. It's hardly ever breaking news, but I go, okay. So yes, that is clearly a factor. And then you have the competition among them for specialty audiences. So we get our information from specialty audiences. Keep going back there. Yeah.
I think the social media and the fact that we now have the internet in our pocket.
Yeah.
The fact that we can actually find all of the data that we ever want.
Yeah.
And now with the fact that they have algorithms that reinforce our viewpoints as we search for things, they feed us more of what we already are looking for to reinforce it.
Absolutely. So social media and all the political scientists point to that. That is new in the last 35 years. That is new. And it's often called an accelerant of polarization. It just accelerates it. You can spread, quote, you were generous when you said information, because some of it's misinformation, right? And it can spread rapidly through populations. And again, this is where the social scientists are always kind of behind the times on this. But once you get wrong information in your head, it is hard to get it out. And that's true of all of us. So take your least favorite politician, and then I'll tell you a lie about that person. And you go, ooh. And then a little bit later you say, actually, it wasn't true. It's still occupying your brain. And so we are just overwhelmed through social media with this information. So I'm going to go over here. Yeah, go for it. So say that again.
There are people who were left behind economically.
Yeah.
Their sector of the society did. They know they were left behind. They watched the rest of society go forward, and they're pissed.
Yeah, so globalization has been a big factor in that. It was back in the 80s, a lot of folks thought it was the answer. All the ships would rise. We just everywhere in the world you can specialize. And there have been big pockets of people who did great on our small pockets. Some of us did well, and a lot of people didn't, and they're mad, and understandably. And then, of course, when people are angry, both you get media and political folks who will play on that. So absolutely another one. Who else we have in the back? Yeah.
There's been a change philosophically in business where all of a sudden the shareholders have become very much important, where in the past it was the stakeholders
Yeah,
And with
interesting.
stakeholders, I would define that as not
Yeah.
only the shareholders, but
Yeah.
also the management, also the workers and the suppliers and all the other people, customers, all those other people involved. And it's all evolved to strictly the shareholders being important.
And so employees do not feel connected in the same way, and consumers don't trust as much. And then this feeds the distrust, feeds the distrust. Yes, over here, Bruce.
I'm a mathematician and I take the blame because Cambridge Analytica and groups like that, the people that do statistical tests on tiny groups, focus groups, and then use that to divide us so they can make money off of us. And that's the conflict entrepreneurs that Monica Guzman talks about.
Yes, yes.
They're
So
a
there's
big
some
problem.
big money in this. And just to introduce that term, conflict entrepreneurs, there are people who make their living and get their status about spreading lies. And the most recent one to me that was so upsetting, I used to live in Baltimore. Okay, that bridge. There were people who, when they woke up in the morning, their news feed from their favorite conflict entrepreneur said there was a conspiracy that brought the bridge down before they got the actual news. I mean, so is there no shame? Is there no shame? But if you make your living on that, and then you say, well, it could be, and you have all those followers. So there's lots of money to be made on polarization. That's a piece of this, right? In a way that was not true before. So a couple of others, yeah. The fall of the Soviet Union. So tell us how the fall of the Soviet Union contributed.
Much went from U.S. versus Soviets to now U.S. versus U.S. in a lot of ways. We lost a common enemy, so we could always find common ground by not liking communism, and we lost that common ground.
Yes, I think that is absolutely true. I grew up in the era we had that common enemy. We used to say, it's almost ludicrous now, that politics ends at the shore. President would go overseas, and then we had this sort of like, this is family now, and you don't go after them when they're outside, and that's completely changed. Yeah. So in fact, I used to think, maybe a pandemic would bring us together. You don't actually want to trust anything I say from now on, okay? A virus, and then we have medical people, and we have scientists and all that, right? Okay, so then I was down to one. So we had the Soviet Union. I gave up on pandemic. I used to think extraterrestrials coming down. Are they blue or red? Okay, and are we responding to with pacifism, or should we nuke them? We would be divided within hours. Now, I'm going back to what you said. I'm going to have some optimism before we finish, so I don't want you to get too down here. But we have to understand the multifaceted nature of what we're dealing with, and because if we only think it's one thing or somebody's political party or some particular politician, we're going to miss it. So is there one more that hasn't been mentioned? So we'll do these two and then we'll finish.
You're quick.
Well, she's the quickest one in the room. I recorded her for that.
I was going to say it ties in with social media and the internet and technology. It's the way that we are systematizing relationships that used to be human. And so we're dehumanizing them and putting machine interfaces between people. Yeah. And I have young teenagers, and one of the things that I see there is the damage that can be caused by one action is so much greater today. You might have 4 kids that are around when somebody gets milk spilled on themselves at lunch and people laugh, but now you can have the whole school laughing at them.
They've recorded it. The stakes are higher. We have this anxious generation, and a growing body of research suggesting that the social media and the iPhones are contributing to that anxiety. And also, people are freer to be nasty when they're not in front of you. And so we have to figure out how to renorm ourselves for that social media. One more in the back?
I think there's been a big change with the church and its role in our society.
Yeah.
We've stopped being communities. We've stopped seeing each other in our moments of need as humans. And so we stop having the compassion for one another. The government has taken a lot of that away.
Yeah. Yeah, and in religious communities, you've been more apt traditionally to encounter people who maybe differ from you politically. Okay, so that gives me a chance to add one thing. I'm here with a Rotary group. There's been a decline since the 1970s in civic participation. Okay, the PTA, the various clubs. There was a time when people ran for office for the PTA president. Now you have to, like, the most important group is the nominating committee, to convince somebody to join. The organizations, and Robert Putnam, you've probably heard the book Bowling Alone, has documented that the rise is in check writing organizations. So AARP finds you when you turn 50. They find you, okay? And then for very little money and no need to show up anywhere, you get these benefits. I'm not putting them down. There's a need for that. People sign up for it. But there's been a decline in, and so when we show up at various groups, and then somebody's got to be the recording secretary and the treasurer, and somebody's got to run the darn meeting, right? We encounter each other. We build community. We do things together across different. It doesn't matter who you vote for if you can do a good job on this campaign. Okay, and so there has been that decline as well. So one of the piece of good news is that Americans overwhelmingly believe we are too divided. Over 90% of Americans name polarization as a huge problem. Now, they may blame the other side for it, but pollsters say you don't get 90% on anything. You have a flat earth, you don't, so we know we have a problem, and the beginning of change is to say we have a problem. And it has to be a we problem. That's how I put this. It has to be a we problem that we have. So what can we do individually, and what can we do together? And so I'm glad a number of you said, in terms of why you came, that you're dealing with issues in your own family life and friendships, because many of us are. And so I'd like to suggest some principles for you. And the first is practicing curiosity and respect. Curiosity about why people differ from me, and respect that they are as thoughtful as I am in coming to that view. That's countering the othering. The othering is, who are they? How could they come to be that? And what I'd like to suggest, there's a challenge for us all. If you can't answer the question, take whatever issue is powerful to you, like gun rights, gun control. How could people possibly oppose whatever? Or how could people possibly get behind something? If you can't answer the question, you have some work to do. Because there is an answer, and the answer is not they are ignorant or duped or have bad will. If I line up people who differ from me and I say they are either ignorant or they're duped by somebody or they don't care, then I am contributing to polarization. There is an answer to the question of how some rational people can vote for and support ideas that are different from mine. And I see it as my job, and this is some of the change that I've gone through in this Braver Angels work, where we're half red, half blue at every leadership level. So I'm interacting all the time with people who are different from me. And I've come to an internal discipline of not allowing myself the easy way out to say, they don't know. I know they don't know. Okay. And if they were only as smart as I am, they would line up with me. I'm saying that it's human nature. I completely get it. I completely get it. And I've practiced it in much of my life. Okay. But what I'm suggesting is practicing curiosity. So here's the thought experiment. Just think about this upcoming, we have a presidential election coming up. Did you people know that? It's November. Yeah, anyway. And most of us have a strong interest in this. And it's very hard for us to understand why people would vote the other way. And a thought experiment would be, imagine our system, our election, our polarization was occurring in a far off country you knew almost nothing about, but you're assigned to study and to learn about. Where you don't have, as they say, a dog in that race. Or imagine where we are now, go 3 centuries out and you're studying history. And you're looking back at this time and saying, oh, isn't this interesting how we had the rise of these forces and how Congress got so polarized and how the Republican Party went this way and the Democratic Party went that way. Isn't that interesting? When you can engage curiosity, you find things interesting, and then you find people interesting who hold views, while still, this is the trick, still holding your own views, but having interest, having curiosity about other points of view, so that you can answer the question about why people believe that. Now, one of the ways you get there interpersonally is by asking people how they came to their political view. So don't just focus on what you believe, but how you came to it. Okay? So talk about gun rights, gun control. So how did you become very much concerned with supporting the Second Amendment and concerned about the loss of that right? How did you come to that? Tell me a story. How did you come to be really concerned about gun proliferation and want to have more regulation? How did you come to it? Gets you the story. So extended families, as I said, are the great bastion of political. So I have relatives from all over the country. And when we get together at the holidays, whatever, I have a habit of going up to a relative who comes from somewhere else and say, what are people in your neck of the woods saying about blah, blah, blah? And I can ask anything about the Trump trials, about Biden's age, anything. Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. What are people in where you are saying about this? And I'm talking about some very strong-willed relatives, by the way, who, if I just come up and said, so, you think Trump is a crook, should go to prison or not? Okay, we'd be into it. But when I ask, and it reminds me what I used to do with my kids when they were teenagers. If you said to them, any of your friends use drugs? That's a loser, right? Asking them to betray, and then it would be which one? And I know their parents, right? So one day at dinner, I said, I read in the paper that most kids in most high schools around here know somebody who knows somebody who could get drugs. And then they went, duh, of course. And then they educated me about their school, okay? And so with this particular relative, we start that way. And then he expounds on his community. He's also telling me where he differs from them, because hardly anybody is lockstep. And then I look for something to agree with. Ask an open-ended question and start with something you agree with. Somebody tell me, what's the advantage that the first things that I ask a question, and then the first thing out of my mouth after that is that I agree with you about such and such? What's the advantage? Yeah, I'm an agreeable person, and I'm not going after them. Because what a lot of people are afraid of is they're going to say the wrong thing, and then bang, we're going to be at it. And here's the thing I've learned in this work is you can almost always find something to agree on. So let's take a simple problem like immigration. I don't know anybody who thinks we have a great immigration system. It's widely acknowledged that it's broken and that one Congress after another has kicked the can down the road on it. Okay? It's a mess. I can agree with you on that. I'm not defending or just attacking. We have a problem with this. Now, where we may differ is how to solve it. So what I've learned over the years is that if you start with values and aspirations and goals, like education, don't start with public funding for private schools. Right, you've been there, okay? And then, you know, if you start with, we need to do better in educating our children, and we all want our children to flourish, and that means a good education. And so what I've learned is that if you can engage people about values, hopes, and aspirations, and about the existence of problems, so it's not just Pollyanna, we have a problem with, values and concerns, you're in to a conversation. Because then when we differ about the means, policies are means to ends. They're not the ends in themselves. They are not the ends in themselves. They are means to ends. And we can get very attached to them and they become very symbolic to us, but they are means. They are laws, they are policies. The big thing is what the ends are. So if you get stories from people, if you engage people with about values and concerns, you're part of the way there. You're part of the way there. And in Braver Angels, doing a little switch to what we've done in general in Braver Angels, elections. Anybody aware that we have a little concern about our election system? Yeah, you're an election judge, right? This is fundamental. If we can't agree on who wins elections, where are we? Where are we? Right? I mean, there's hardly anything more fundamental than that. This would be like baseball teams without umpires, right? Well, actually, I grew up that way as a kid. We just fought it out. There were some advantages to that. But so what we did with Braver Angels, we did 25 workshops around the country. We called them common ground workshops, and we chose trustworthy elections as the theme. Each of them had 8 people whose major concern is fraud, and 8 people whose major concern is access. That's the fundamental divide. That's the fundamental divide. But there's other aspects of it, but that's the fundamental divide. And so we invited people into the space for 5 hours. They shared a meal in there. Where we had people, we did exercises where people got to tell their story about how they came to care about this issue. And they did that in pairs and in small groups. They listened to one another. And then we had them pair up and say, well, what's your position on this? How do you think we should handle this issue? So there was a lot of listening. And then each group goes to a separate room. So I'll call it the reds and the blues, go to separate rooms. And then they're asked, having listened to the other side, what values and concerns and solutions, policies, do you believe in that you think they may believe in? Which ones do you believe in that you think they might believe in? So not stuff you don't think they'll ever. And then they come together and each side presents values, concerns, and solutions to the other. And then there's questions of clarification. And then everybody in the room votes, and it has to be unanimous. It has to be unanimous, and we all agree on this. The ones that are close to unanimity, sometimes it's a wording issue, they go back into small groups that are mixed red, blue to see if they can clean it up, see if they can change the language a bit to bring people along. And at the end of it, they come out with these lists. So 25 workshops, and then a group of 12, 6 reds, 6 blues, who have been leaders in this, came together in Boston a couple months ago, and I was fortunate enough to facilitate. It was actually fortunate, it was hard. And we cranked out 20 common solutions, policy solutions, that are now in a document that we're distributing around. And everybody bent. Everybody bent. They didn't sell out their principles, but they bent. I'll give you the principles that came from this first. And you can go on Braver Angels, Trustworthy Election for the document. But they have these principles unanimously agreed on. These are the three. Again, this was hundreds of people who differ politically. The first is voting should be easy, cheating should be hard. Everybody agrees on that. Second is every citizen should have equal say in who will govern them. This is done through free and fair elections. And then the third, the American government will fail if candidates refuse to accept any outcome other than victory. Everybody agreed on those. Now, in the details, one of the things around that last one, it says, in our system, the courts are the ultimate arbiter. You feel like you're not treated fairly, you go to the courts and it works up through systems. And we must accept the final verdict of those courts if we're gonna have a functioning country. We must accept that. And so people agree, and I'll give you one example, and so some of this may, I'm assuming we'll have a little political diversity in here. I'll give you something that makes Blues nervous. The Blues agreed on voter ID. Wasn't photo ID, but government issued ID, and it was the government has an affirmative responsibility that every eligible citizen has government issued ID. Push it out, make sure everybody has it. Okay? And that makes a lot of Blues nervous. But most Americans see that as reasonable. Okay? And the Reds agreed to a national holiday on election day. Okay? That made them nervous. And the analogy I developed as I facilitated that final group is that if you see yourself as fellow citizens, as members of this kind of American family, and you listen to people's real concerns. So when the Blues listened to the Reds, they heard concerns about fraud. And even if the Blues thought there's no objective evidence for it, it's real. I'm not talking about some politician up there. No, this is real. So how am I going to accommodate that? If we're going to move together forward, how do I bend so you feel better about that? And the analogy I used is, suppose you and a spouse or partner, one of you is more concerned about household security than the other. And one of them wants an alarm system. The other, we don't need an alarm system, it's a safe neighborhood and blah, 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 blah. Well, if you're in a relationship and somebody continues to feel that way and you can afford it, you get the darn alarm system, even though you don't think it's necessary. You see what I'm saying? Because we're in a relationship, and if we're going to move forward together, we have to make some accommodations. So it's a different attitude. It's bringing a different attitude of curiosity, of respect, and of connecting with values and concerns underneath policies, and finding something to agree with. And at the last point on that, at the level of values, concerns, and aspirations, there's almost always something to agree on. Almost always something to agree on. Now, you can't force it if there's not, but that's what I'm suggesting. Then the last one for the personal part is paying attention to how we talk about the political other in our own group. How we talk about the political other with people who agree with me. I believe that most of the nastiest conversations, the most polarizing, negative, othering, disdain, they're unethical, occurs with like-minded people. And so one of our workshops is called Depolarizing Within. How do I work on my own inner polarizer? Doesn't mean I give up on my political views and passions, but how do I work that? And then how do I intervene gracefully with like-minded people when the conversation veers into what we call in Braver Angels, the four horsemen of polarization: stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, and contempt. Stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, contempt for millions of people, some of whom are in my family and I went to school with, okay? The four horsemen. And so, because what happens is, if you and I are the smart people, and we're together and we talk about those yahoos, this is like family therapy theory. I'm a family therapist. It creates an artificial bond. Like, Heather, you and I you're even smarter than I thought because you think they're yahoos. And in fact, we have a little competition. Yahoo is too basic a term. We could up it from there, okay? And so it creates an artificial, you know what I'm talking about? It creates an artificial closeness of the smart people. And I view that as damaging in its own way as what we do to each other on social media, because it keeps it going. I'm stopping. Yeah, it keeps it going. It fuels it, and so we don't actually use the word civility that much in Braver Angels because civility can be faked. We're talking about respect, and if I respect you, then I'm going to wince in conversations when you're put down. And so in that workshop, the second half of that workshop, it's how to intervene gracefully in conversations with like-minded people when they veer into contempt without getting fired from your own group, okay? And without coming across, well, so Carl, I am a braver angel, and you're obviously not, okay? So it's tempting. It's tempting. You know, now that I've become a depolarizer, I'm more like, you know, it's an endless it's self-criticism, right? To look at oneself. But once I got that in my mind, there are ways to do it. Like if Brock were to say, well, they're all blah blah blah, he could say, actually, not all. I mean, I know some folks who blah blah blah. Or they're for people who are against affirmative action or for it or whatever, this is their view. And I say, from my experience of conversations and reading, I think for some folks that's the case. And I think there are other folks who do this. That would be an example of when it's those other people, if that's occurring with my people, I can gently challenge that. And then you can always reference if you like, I read this thing on the Braver Angels website or blah, blah, blah. So that's the last thing I want to say about the personal part. Now, what we can do together, obviously, you know, I would encourage you to think about connecting up with Braver Angels. By the way, we used to be called Better Angels, as Ellen said, from the Lincoln phrase, the better angels of our nature. And then somebody sued us because they owned the trademark. It's a great country. It's a great country. We will crush you, they said. And we're this little nonprofit, so we changed it. We kind of like Braver Angels now. So it's and we have some Braver Angels lead. Raise your hand if you're a Braver Angels leader here in the room. We got some folks in the room, and Bruce. Okay, yeah, he didn't raise his hand. Yeah, Bruce, you have to listen to me. I know you've heard it 5 times, but pretend you're listening, okay? So we have mutual respect all the time, as you just saw. It's called public shaming, is what I just did. It's an advanced technique that you have to go through the other workshops to get to. So we bring people together and we teach skills. Like I just gave you some examples of skills. You can use skills. You can say, I'm in dangerous territory now, and I want to bring my best self to this conversation. So that's what you're going to do as a candidate. Okay. So we've had candidates who, when they, after they took some of our skills workshops, I remember this one candidate, he said he used to skip the houses with the lawn sign for his opponent because he didn't know what to do with them. And once he got the skill set down, curiosity, respect, he didn't expect them to change their mind, but here's the self-interest in this. When they're mentioning it to somebody else who doesn't have a lawn sign, Carl's not such a bad guy. I'm not going to vote for him. He's too liberal conservative. But it was having the skill set where your goal is not to get somebody to change their mind, but to connect with that person. So, and we've had a number of political folks that have been doing these workshops, and I'm going to return to that in a minute. I want to mention a particular project that Ellen referred to called Reduce the Rancor, Minnesota. This is a Braver Angels project in which we're pulling together lots of organizations around the state, including Rotary District 5960 as sponsors, and doing things with them. We have up to 9 colleges now. And Ellen, when you told the story of 18 years ago and you had those 2 political leaders, this is what I learned in Brave Angels. Unless you have red and blue leadership from the get-go, forget it. Forget it. Because you will just be seen as taking one side. So who do we get? Ken Martin, the chair of the DFL, David Hand, chair of the Republican Party. They signed on as visible co-sponsors. It took a while, but they're good guys. They know each other. They have respect for each other. I had lunch with them, and I think and what was their self-interest in this? There always has to be some self-interest. Each party is divided. Each party is divided, okay? And so people are fighting within their parties. So Howard Thurman, who was a theologian who influenced Martin Luther King Jr., once wrote that hate, once released, will not be confined to its original target. Hate, once released, will not be confined to its original target. So you and I may bond about those others, and then you're not quite with me enough, so then you become the other. And so that's some of their interest. And what I can tell you, I've never had this experience. Once we lined up those 2, then college presidents and others took us seriously. I'm not used to sending an email to a college president who writes back right away. It says, let's talk. Because they're worried about the problem, it's happening on college campuses, and if you have the political cover of those 2 people. So I invite you, you can look at our website, and I know Rotary is going to be involved in this. Speaking of Rotary, I read about the 4-way test, about where it came from. And a number of you know this story, but maybe not everybody. Herbert Taylor, he developed that before he was in Rotary, or he brought it to Rotary. And he developed it when he took over a company that was failing. It was teetering near bankruptcy, lost the confidence of its customers. Its competitors were taking it to lunch. And he decided there had to be a cultural internal transformation in the company, and that it had to be based on values. And he developed the 4-way test for himself. He put it on his desk. He was actually embarrassed about showing it to anybody else because it seemed so, And he said he was humiliated by it. He was humiliated because he wasn't living up to it. They were not being honest with their customers, for example. They were exaggerating. They were being unfair to their competitors by unfairly comparing products. He was humiliated, he said, by this, and he held on to it, and then he decided to share it, and his employees, came on board, and then it became a company-wide thing, and the company really survived. So, and one of the reasons I wanted to say that, I was so impressed with that story, is that humility is really important in all of this. So in our workshops, when we bring reds and blues together, we ask people to talk about the downsides of their own group. And so I want to show you now, we're going to do a little video of CNN. You'll see Van Jones. They wanted to go out and this is suburban Chicago, watch one of our red blue workshops, and you're going to see people coming together. It's about 9 minutes, and you're going to see a couple of opportunities where we ask people to be humble about their own side. Because what we do in politics is, I'm even better than you. We invite humility. And so we'll take a look at that, and then we'll be finishing up.
All right, sadly this week, We saw politicians acting like preschoolers again. A meeting that was supposed to be about Syria turned into another instance of name calling and finger pointing. And what's worse, this behavior is being mirrored by regular people all across the country. Liberals and conservatives can't talk to each other anymore. It's tearing up friendships and families. I recently found, though, a group that's trying to heal this division. It's called Better Angels. And since 2016, they've been hosting workshops all over the country, bringing folks together to find common ground. I went to one of their red-blue workshops last weekend in Evanston, Illinois. Take a look.
So the goals are more understanding, seeing if there's something in common.
Here's something special. Conservatives and liberals sitting side by side, talking, smiling, actually listening to each other.
Hamilton Chang here as a red. I'm coming here out of frustration in some ways because I feel like, you know, we've been excommunicated from a lot of our friends in the last couple of years, and it makes me sad.
They're here for a workshop put on by the Better Angels group. Their goal is to help bridge the divide among liberals and conservatives, and some community members have come to watch.
I'm Drew Morrison. I came here as a blue today. We need to be able to have real constructive dialogue among each other, even among issues that we may disagree on.
Now, they split up into reds and blues. Reds for conservative, blues for liberal, and they discuss the stereotypes they think the other side believes about them.
Judgmental. Anti-religious.
And are there any grains of truth to these perceptions?
Hyper PC. Okay, so what is true here?
We attack people for saying the words rather than attacking the words themselves.
Is there a kernel of truth in the stereotype that the Reds are closed-minded, intolerant?
There are principles that, right, I stand by. It may look intolerant in some ways, but abiding by the rule of law with respect to immigration, abiding by the rule of law for things like that, it looks intolerant.
Both say they're surprised by what they hear from the other side.
A lot of Reds recognize that they're, you know, the descendants of immigrants and they're pro-immigration. A lot of ink and TV airtime has been spilled on some of the sensational and very dramatic things that have been occurring at the border, and that really obscures, I think, the more nuanced conversation of a nation having control of its borders and welcoming immigrants, but doing it through appropriate channels and means.
What really struck me was when Larry said, we believe in science and we want to use science to solve issues such as climate rather than rushing to a sweeping government program, which is like, we recognize for ourselves, oh yeah, we do kind of do that. And you said, yeah, you do that.
I was struck about how the other side has principles that they live by. And we have principles too. And it seems like we both get into trouble when we have absolutes.
The liberals are then asked to sit in the middle of the group and talk about why they think progressive ideas are the best to resolve America's problems. As they answer, the conservatives are allowed only to listen. No rebuttals, no interruptions.
I think that inequality causes some people to feel like burn it all down. I don't want to burn it all down, so I think, frankly, in the interest of preserving capitalism, we need to engage in as you say, leveling the playing field, redistribution, giving people a stake in the system.
Blue values in terms of being accepting and open to very diverse points of view. We're open-minded about moral values, right? Like, so same-sex marriage, sexual orientation, gender fluidity, these things I think are good for the United States because they're acknowledging and giving a voice and including groups that have been historically marginalized, have had no voice.
What are your reservations or concerns about your own side, about the blue side?
Some of my experiences have been that in a lot of cases, if you don't adhere to every single value or every single position, then you're marginalized, or you're seen as sort of betraying the cause in a way. Yeah.
I agree that words matter and that words can hurt. But I see arguments being shut down. I see people not being allowed to speak.
Next, it's the conservatives' turn.
I think what's great about the red vision is it emphasizes personal freedoms. And I think that in order for people to soar to great heights, a maximization in personal freedoms is partially responsible.
the ability to progress and allow a society to reach, and people within the society, individuals, to achieve the most that they can achieve with the least amount of interference from outside. Assuming it's a positive thing.
What are your reservations or concerns about your own site?
I think with personal responsibility, personal freedoms, there will be people who are lost. I think it's a harsh truth. We lose our messaging and we lose our principle of caring and compassion by saying, hey, free market, right, sink or swim. We have to acknowledge that people sink and make sure that we take care of those people.
At the end of the day, everybody said this experience is going to impact their personal interactions with people on a day-to-day basis.
It's just great to hear reasonable conservative voices in the room, and then when I'm in my friend group that's very sordid and people make some extreme comments about all those people, I can say, well, not all those people. Come on, let's just, pull back.
Same, right? Being that ambassador, we'd started out with why are we here? And I had said something that basically to the extent of being excommunicated from some of my friends for many, many years, friends that I love. So I have some phone calls to make and have some listening versus talking.
My takeaway is that neither side is a monolith, that there's a recognition that these are thorny problems that we're trying to address, and that there are going to be some very nuanced solutions to those problems.
So you were an observer the whole time. You were taking copious notes. What do you think would happen if stuff like this was going on all across the country? So whether it's a weekend where 100,000 of these things went down, what do you think would happen in America?
I think people would be better equipped to have these sorts of conversations and think in terms of working together towards solutions to problems rather than seeing the other side as just a barrier to progress.
We got to know each other a little bit better as people.
What is causing you to want to be this deeply involved in this bipartisan work?
It's about relationships. I'm a physician, I'm a parent, I'm a spouse, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. All of our relationships are built on communication, and we do it very poorly, and we're getting worse and worse at it.
We can disagree on religion, right? Heaven and hell. And yet, for some reason, we're at a point in time in history in this country where you can't disagree about policy.
Do you feel like you learned anything today that might help you bridge that gap?
Absolutely. To be able to hear, try to be as non-judgmental as possible, right? But just to try and pay attention and try to listen as opposed to trying to prove or defend. It was just a good exercise.
One woman said the experience made her more comfortable sharing her voice as a conservative who lives in a liberal town.
I was apprehensive about coming because sometimes today I don't feel like maybe being a conservative or having a conservative voice is PC. And so I think maybe there are a lot of people out there that maybe have this point of view, but they're not really saying it. I really believe if groups like this could get together, take the next step, talk about issues, and sit down and hash it out, I really think we could come up with some solutions, and we may even do a better job than some of our politicians.
You couldn't do worse.
There you go.
Real signs of hope.
Look at one of our Red Blue workshops, and I have a few more things to say before we finish, but I'd like to do one more exercise with you. As you think about what we have talked about, particularly in the second part of our time here, about what we can do individually, what we can do collectively, I'd like to ask you to think about this question. What can you do in your own life, personal or organizational, to reduce the rancor and to help build bridges in a world where bridges are burning down? So what's a takeaway, something you can do in your own life, personal or organizational, to build bridges, to reduce the rancor at this point in our history? So 30 seconds of reflection on that question. What can you do in your own life? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, you get Rotarians bonding and you can't break them apart. Shh. Thank you. Thank you. So just a few people who'd be willing to just say something you're gonna take home and work on. And we have our, you want to go for it? So let's go fast, just really quickly. Yeah. Say it again. Yeah.
Try to compromise. I'm reading a book by Lee Kuan Yew. You've heard of him. He was the head of Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about Democrats and Republicans. The reason it worked was compromise, and it's gone.
And you're going to work on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Appreciate it. Somebody else up here?
Hi, I'm, since we're mostly surrounded by like-minded people, going to work on tearing down those judgments and trying to empathize with others. And then my friend Brian here brought up a good point of like, instead of jumping right into the exercise of political conversations, start out with just if there's a disagreement at work or with friends, like start exercising that muscle.
Exercise the muscle around less existential things. Yes. Thank you. Yes, somebody, let's run back all the way over there. We'll just do one or two more and then we're going to move to finish up. She's fast. She's fast. Yeah.
I think when it comes to the idea of bridge building, there's maybe something counterintuitive about it where to enter into bridge building with the mindset of like, I am a evangelical missionary right now to reach the unreached peoples of this group, right, is not conducive to, productive dialogue, right? Whereas to carry with you the orientation of a person who, wants to connect with others and then put yourself in situations where you can do so, right, is kind of the more effective way of doing that.
As opposed to be the missionary. That's right. So one more. And yeah.
I really liked your part about starting with values, hopes, and aspirations to get into the conversations.
Yeah.
So if you are anticipating engaging in a rough conversation or you're supporting somebody who has a really rough opinion, let's backtrack. What do we hope?
Yeah.
What are our aspirations? It just helps everybody step back and take a breath.
Step back. You're good. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate all that. So a couple of things I want to mention before we finish up. I said that we're getting political leaders, elected officials increasingly approaching us. The two of the criticisms or two of the concerns, 2018, the last time I spoke to Rotary, whereas, do we have any evidence that our workshops are actually working? And we do now because we have political scientists studying our workshops and people do depolarize. And then the second one was, what about elected officials? And we're getting increasing invitations from county commissioners, county administrators, city council people, school boards, and others, and some state legislatures. So we did a workshop for our state legislature. And some New England legislatures, we've been doing some meaningful work. So 4 of them with New Hampshire state legislature, and they have formed a Braver Angels caucus in the legislature. And if you want to have any hope about Washington, Google the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group of 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats. They have a meal every week. They work on bipartisanship. They had a lot to do with the infrastructure bill passing, for example. So they're people who are trying to bridge the divide. And they asked us Braver Angels, to do some workshops with them. And in the workshops, we didn't do what we did here. You can't ask them to exercise that self-reflective humility, right? You can't, because but we ask this question: what life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? And we invite them to go deeper than, well, when I was in junior high and they voted me the class president, go a little deeper than that, which they do. Everybody gets 5 uninterrupted minutes. They get several minutes to prepare. They know the question's coming even the day before. These have been powerful. Tears, stories a lot about family, of family tragedy, of deaths, of aspirations, and so I want to tell one story of this was actually in a state legislature where a Democrat sitting here, small group, said that he grew up in the foster care system. His father abandoned the family. His mother dealt with paranoid schizophrenia. He and his siblings bounced around the foster care system. So when he became an adult, he was determined to try to make a difference for these kids and families. And that's why he went into public service. He no sooner finished than a Republican sitting on this side said, I don't believe this. I grew up in the foster care system. He told his story. I get emotional telling it. It was so powerful. They differed on how they wanted to help. One was a Democrat. He was more interested in government programming. The other was more interested in the voluntary sector, the churches, and he got into labor unions for job training and so on. So he didn't trust government. Okay? But the root system, the value, the aspiration was similar. And then one with Congress, when we went around the room and the stories, powerful stories. There was a guy who from the West Coast, member of the House, Republican, who introduced himself. He said, I'm as conservative as the day is long, but I'm a pragmatist. That's why I'm in the problem solvers caucus. You have to work across the aisle. He told a story about growing up in poverty with with an outhouse in a rural county, nobody with any education. And his mother, when he was age 10, took him to the State House, Capitol, and said, son, you could be here someday. You could do this. And he did. And he didn't stop there. He got to Congress. And then there were other stories just equally powerful. And when we asked people at the end, what are you taking with you from this? He said, you can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. You can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. It doesn't solve all the problems of the world, but it's a start. And so I want to end with a quote from Abraham Lincoln at his first inaugural address just before the Civil War. And just to thank you for our time here, and I'm going to hand the mic back over to Ellen. He said, we are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Thank you.
As we conclude our 18th, As we conclude our 18th annual Rotary Forum, Community Forum, Ellen and I would like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Bill. You were awesome tonight. Wasn't that a great presentation? Great takeaways. I have some stuff I can take back home and try out. We also have a little token of our appreciation, the 4-weight test, paperweight for your desk back at home. So thank you. There you go. We also want to thank all the Rotarians and guests for being here tonight in person and virtually. You made it a huge success as well. To our guests here tonight, we hope that you'll join Rotary soon. It is a great organization. We also want to thank Rotarian John Andrews and your crew for sharing your campsite with us tonight. Let's give them a big hand. And if our planning team could stand up real quick, we really want to thank our planning team again. You were awesome, and we couldn't have done it without you. So our planning team, take a quick stand. I know you're here. There they are. Also, as you leave tonight, please turn in your evaluation form at the registration table on your way out. If you need a certificate of attendance for continuing education, copies are located on the registration table as well. Our virtual attendees will be receiving an evaluation form and certificate by email.
Yeah, Heidi wanted to recognize Clara Lillis, who is past governor also of 5960. Clara's in the back. Yeah, and David, I forgot to say that you were the president of Sunrise Club when we first had our first forum. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Bill, thanks from me too. Really great. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you for coming again tonight. Hope to see you next year at the 19th Annual Community Forum. Safe travels and happy trails to you until we meet again.